Hello, I'd like to talk a bit about developments on a video I made before about a young woman called Cait Reilly from Birmingham who was involved in the Workfare scheme. I'm just going to read a bit from the Times newspaper, an article on this. For once, some good news on the issue of unemployment and workfare and exploitation, so issues I have very strong views on. But I'm just going to read directly from the paper. So just bear with me a minute. Okay. Graduate forced to do unpaid work wins appeal court fight. A graduate has thrown the government's back to work programme into advanced chaos after a court ruled that she should not have been made to work in Poundland for nothing. The decision could lead to compensation for hundreds of benefit claimants who had their job seekers allowance docked for refusing to take part in the government's work programmes. Cait Reilly, 24, from Birmingham, was obliged to leave her volunteer post at a local museum and work unpaid at the Poundland store in Kingsheath for 2 weeks under the sector-based Work Academy scheme. The geology graduate was told if she did not carry out the work placement, she would lose her job seeker's allowance. She was obliged to stack shelves and clean floors at the store. Three appeal court judges ruled yesterday that the government had acted unlawfully by requiring her to work for nothing in order to keep claiming her job seeker's allowance. Last night, ministers were frantically rewriting the terms of the work programmes and planning to rush emergency regulations through Parliament so that the schemes can continue. Miss Reilly was joined in her legal action by Jamison Wilson, 40, an unemployed HGV driver and qualified engineer from Nottingham, who was required to clean furniture, unpaid, for 6 months in another programme. The court threw out their argument that being required to work for benefits constituted forced labour and contravened their human rights, but it did uphold that the government had not put into law enough information about the various work schemes and so exceeded its powers when it set them up by relying on the 1995 Act. It means that thousands of unemployed people who've had benefits stocked for not taking part in schemes such as work experience are now entitled to a rebate. But the Department for Work and Pensions dug in last night and said it would not pay a penny until all legal avenues had been explored. We have no intention of giving back money to anyone who has had benefits removed because they refuse to take getting into work seriously. We're considering a range of options to ensure this does not happen, a spokesman said. The Court of Appeal refused the government permission to appeal, but the DWP said it would take the matter to the Supreme Court. Miss Reilly said she was delighted with the judgment. Those 2 weeks were a complete waste of my time as experience did not help me get a job. I wasn't given any training and I was left with no time to do my voluntary work or search for other jobs. The only beneficiary is Poundland, a multi-millionaire pound company, she said. Mr. Wilson said he was left destitute after his benefits were cut. I refused to participate because I objected to being made to clean furniture for 30 hours a week for 6 months when I knew it wouldn't help me find employment. Mark Hoban, the employment minister, said that government will be pushing through emergency regulations to enable the scheme to continue. Liam Barron, the shadow work and pension secretary, said 2 years in David Cameron and Ian Duncan Smith's so-called welfare revolution is in a state of advanced chaos. Okay, it's quite a long article, so thank you for bearing with me. But the reason I read it out is because I didn't really want to leave anything out. The Times is a comprehensive paper. It's actually a Tory-leaning paper, ironically, but I find it quite centrist. And unlike the Gutter Press, that was quite a balanced report. Okay, let's be very clear about this. This young woman, Cait Reilly, was forced to work in Poundland while she was unemployed in order to keep claiming her job seeker's allowance. And the other guy there, obviously his experience was even worse, 6 months cleaning furniture, unpaid. And that's not called job seeker's allowance payment, it's not payment. You cannot call job seeker's allowance a living wage, because it simply isn't. And if you're under the age of 25, I believe that amounts to up to 4 times less than minimum wage. I can't quote the exact figure. My own experience was 4 years ago, 2009, I went through it. But at one point I did try to work out exactly what I was being paid per hour. It worked out at about, don't quote me on this, it might be a little more, a little less, roughly £1.50. £1.50 an hour. Now the legal minimum wage in this country, in fact at that time I believe was £5.80, something like that. So it worked out at roughly 4 times less. Okay, now, I don't particularly want to rant and rave in this video about how awful Workfare is. I do believe it's an abomination. I welcome this news. It's clearly good news. Although we still can't be complacent, those of us who oppose Workfare. It's good that the government scheme has been thrown in the chaos. That's great news. I want them to fall on their face hard. Because their intentions have absolutely nothing to do with lowering unemployment and everything to do with trying to make life for the unemployed as humiliating and soul destroying as possible. Now, this excuse that they've come out with, that the unemployed won't take work seriously, that is a disgusting distortion. This young woman isn't lazy. She's done volunteer work at a museum. She's clearly someone who's intelligent, who has a background in, she's someone who wants to work. She is simply arguing that if she is working, she should be paid for it. And I think that is a very reasonable claim. The same with the HGV driver. What they're saying is this workfare schemes have no guarantee of a job at the end. And in some cases, they see very little benefit in terms of training and so on. In my own experience, I can't remember learning anything. In fact, I remember learning to do a till on a voluntary position I took of my own initiative at a local age concern store. But the place where I was sent, a sort of furniture retailer, a place outside Fence Houses in Tyne and Wear. If you're watching this video, don't go there, boycott it. I think it was First for Beds it was called. Basically, it was, they made furniture components, they also made mattresses, it was something like that. Now, clearly, I felt criminalised from day one. There was a few of my colleagues who were completely civil, but the boss was a prick, quite honestly. He was forcing me to work in his company for nothing. He was getting bribes from private companies to do that. In the end, I actually got fired. First time in my life I've ever been fired from a job. I felt bad, of course, but at the same time, I decided that actually what happened was I voluntarily left the program, and then they informed me afterwards I'd been fired anyway. So that's that. But I don't care because I stepped down on a point of principle. Yes, it meant economic hardship for some time afterwards until I started teaching students. But that's the reality of this. It is forced. It's putting unemployed people into a forced situation because if they don't take part in these programs, then they lose the job seekers allowance, which means they have no money, which means they become economically destitute. And in cases where people maybe are in more difficult situations than myself, I can't imagine the pressure that would put on them. Now, the great British public is woefully ignorant on the situation because they generally get their information from the tabloid press, from Tory lies, and from populist idiots like Gordon Ramsay, Jeremy Kyle, Joey Barton, these sort of celebrities who pump out distortion on the subject. Those of us who have been through Workfare know what it's about. And it sickens me that anyone can actually make excuses for it. Anyone can believe that people should be forced to work for nothing. Now, let me make something very clear. If someone's unemployed, I would always encourage them into the voluntary sector. I've no problem with voluntary work. I think it can be beneficial for CVs. It can be beneficial in terms of training. But forced labour is a different matter. That's exploitation. Let's be quite clear about this. The people forcing claimants into these work placements are private companies who are making enormous profit from this. Their CEOs are millionaires. They're making enormous profit through exploiting people in a vulnerable position because unemployment is a vulnerable position, and they have very, very little say on what they can do in the situation. They have very little power. Officially, a complaint system is in place, but in my experience, it wasn't taken seriously. Now, what this government spokesman said there is a good example of the distortion that they are docking job seekers allowance for people who will not take work seriously. That's the point. It isn't a job. It's exploitation. It's forced labour. I mean, who the hell do these people think they are, expecting claimants to work for nothing, for no salary? And by the way, the job seekers allowance, a proportion of that is taken away from transport, so it's actually reduced from the level of that it would standardly be, which is absolutely not as much as people think. Now, in my own situation, I found it was about right. I never complained it was too little. It wasn't a huge amount of money. In my own situation, it was fine. So it's not the amount that bugged me, but it's the fact that this is blackmail. I.e., you accept our exploitation, you do this forced unpaid labour, or we're going to take away the little money that we do give you, which isn't a wage, by the way. It's like a stipend. It's not a wage. Don't kid yourself. Job seekers allowance is not a wage. And the reports that you read about in the Daily Express and the Sun about people abusing the system and taking in tens of thousands, yes, it does happen. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, those people should be ashamed of themselves. But we have this perverse distortion right now that each and every unemployed person, each and every claimant is like that. And the Tories know what they're doing. They know full well that they're scapegoating these people, all unemployed people. And sadly, the public, to a large extent, does still support it. That's why we don't have an outrage about this. Now, I want to bring your attention. I've created a petition on the website Care2 Causes. I believe the title is End Workfare Exploitation in Britain. Please sign that petition. It's quite straightforward, it's quick and efficient, and there's a more comprehensive description of what the subject is about there. Please sign it. Some people might say, what's the point of signing petitions? Look, even if it doesn't change anything, I believe that it still sends out a message of opposition. So even if the policy doesn't change, it still sends out a message that there are people with a conscience who see that this is wrong. Please, please sign that. If you don't agree, I couldn't care less. Obviously you're not going to sign it, and that's that. But if you do agree, please sign it. If you're not too sure about this, if you're somewhere in the middle, please look at the issues. Please try and be objective. Don't just look at Tory propaganda. Don't just look at tabloid propaganda. Speak to the people who have been through this. Now, some of them, granted, some of them may be wasters. Some of them may have no goals for themselves. Some of them may have abused the system. But many people on that programme are decent, honest, law-abiding people who have fallen on hard times. And as a result of that, they are being victimised even further. And believe me, I've been through this. It's humiliating. It's stressful. It's a little bit intimidating, because being in a situation where you have little power is a little bit frightening, to be completely honest. It's a very, very unpleasant experience, and it is a perverse distortion for any government minister to claim it's about helping the unemployed. That's the language they use on programmes at Question Time to try and make themselves look legitimate, to try and make the policy look legitimate. It isn't. Now, this ruling isn't as far as I would like it to be. I would like the courts to recognise it as forced labour, but still better than nothing. I mean, the clause that they were going on wasn't really, that was trivial, the fact that the government hadn't sort of been entirely honest about. That's not the main issue here. The main issue is that it's forced labour. That's what it is. And there's absolutely no way to gloss it over. I really can't comprehend how the court can't recognise that. And I'm not going to be complacent. This isn't a complete victory. No doubt the government is hell-bent on continuing this programme. They won't abandon it. Governments very rarely abandon programmes, so too stubborn and arrogant to do that. Even though only 3% of claimants actually get a job at the end, proving that it's a dismal failure. And that's it, really. This is progress. This is welcome news. The very fact that they're prepared to consider that it's morally wrong. But, well, that isn't the... the point is the government has been defeated, albeit in small measure on this occasion. But there's a long way to go. For those of us with a conscience, we have to keep promoting this issue. And we have to get the message out there. If you're sympathetic, I'm not expecting you to, be that energetic. But at least when you hear a bigoted person talk about the lazy unemployed deserve it, etc., please counter them. Please spread the information. And one day, maybe, in the future, we will have this abomination known as workfare, abolished from these shores. Because quite frankly, we really cannot lecture any other country on human rights when people are being forced to work against their will. And by the way, that does contradict the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 4, I believe, clearly states no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. It may not be slavery, it absolutely is servitude. And I'm sure there's other articles there that it's violating, but I'm running out of time on this video. Please check my link and please sign the petition. Thank you.